So we'll be looking at a simple example to kind of explain what hooks are and what's the motivation. And the motivation for using React hooks is uh, basically is just to find a way to reuse stateful um, logic, right? That's like the biggest motivation. Reuse stateful logic, and we'll see what that means in a bit. Um, you know, React fundamentally is an abstraction of state. Using a component interface. We'll see what that means with an example. So I'm going to get rid of this. Um, so I'll call my example a counter example that extends a React component. All right. Um, so yeah, we're gonna spot this. And basically, example is just a button that just 1 second. Okay, let's just do this the old way then. This button is just going to be like a counter. Set some um value. It increments the value anytime we click. So for that, we need a button. Okay, my autocomplete is not working for a reason or the other. So this button basically would increment some number, and we can just display that number here. Uh, Value increments incremented a number of times. So let's call this probably count. We can put this in a span something, just a text that shows us what the current value is. Right. Okay, some errors here. Okay. 1 second. Okay, I didn't terminate this properly. So yeah. So count hasn't been set. So we'll set our state. We'll set count to 0. So we'll make this dot state. Cool. So let's just see what we have currently. For to refresh this. So we have this value 0 here. So the idea is that when we click on this button, the value of count increments, on each click. So for that, we have an on click event handler on the button, and what it does basically is to set state in a React class. We use this logic test this to update the state component. So basically, we have we want to update count to be this dot state dot count plus 1 basically. So on each button click, we want to increment the value of count. So right. So when we do this, so this actually works. Now this is how you would create a simple counter in using a stateful component, a state React class basically. So this is a stateful logic, right? Because this logic depends on the state. This component depends on the state. So how do we abstract this functionality? How do we abstract this functionality so that in case I have a button, I want to create a button that basically anywhere I put that button, I want to reuse this logic, right? One of the ways I could do that, I just for the sake of this example or this explanation, create another component that uses this button component. Right, and I just return. So I want to create a generic button that when I click on that button, I can increment the value, of of the counter of some counter. So one of the ways I can do that, so just a trivial example. All right. So sorry, did I say counter? So I have this counter here, and I return this instead. So our app should work as expected. Cool. Now this is good. Um, so um what if I want to this works for now, right? What if I want to use uh this the value the what if I want to use um the the state of counter, right? What if I want to update it and do all that? So components are basically the way we abstract uh, states, and the way we reuse state. um what if I need a generic component that can abstract state? Basically, what if I need a generic component that can abstract state? So for example, let's have a component that does that for us. So let's say state extends, oops, react component, right? And basically what it does is to help us set some arbitrary state. um, um, so in this we're going to return what we call a render, um, a render prop. So I'll check if I have a prop that's a function, the children that is the type of this rather is a function. All right, if the type of this is a function, then I want to return these dot props dot children. I want to pass in the state basically. I could call that the value of the state. All right, state of value, or sorry, right. And so this is a generic state component. So value is basically being set by an initial prop I pass. So I can call that props initial value, something like initial value, something like this. All right, cool. So I want, this is like a generic component that tries to abstract state, and let's find a way to use this with our existing counter. All right. So one of the things I can do here is to use the state component here. So I can do, for example, all right. So let's do this instead. Okay, let's do this instead. Children. Our children is a function. It's called render props. Basically, what it does is to. Okay, I think I'm missing some. Okay, this is correct. I think we're missing some. Okay, you know what I'll just do? I'll just okay, so let's go back. So we have our state component. Basically, we have children props, which is a function that returns some okay. All right. we got this under control. Did anything break? Good. So we don't want this to, we want an arbitrary state. So our state is coming from uh, our value, our count rather, is coming from our abstraction. So this is all right. We'll have to find a way of incrementing this. We'll come to that later. So this has an initial value from what we've explained to be. We want this to be just an abstraction. We don't want to depend on this anymore. We want to build a basic abstraction on state. So we are still dependent on set state, right? So one of the things we can do is to pass in the logic, right, or a callback that updates state, which is something we can do here. And what that does is that it passes in the it takes in the value, sort of the value here, right, and then it updates that value. So right, so we can have this as a second value. So we can call this our set state. Basically, that would set this. So it takes in. So what we need here is just to pass in the state, the count, rather. Let's see if this works, if it breaks. Oh, yeah, it works. So this is a very simple abstraction on state. Now I can use the state component anywhere, passing an initial value, return the current state, and the handler that sets state. So this is a typical abstraction on state. But with this, you see, it becomes a bit complex when we need to pass in the function as children, and we keep repeating this over and over and over. It becomes quite difficult, to scale this. You can have your code over the place quickly. And what if a typical use case is, what if you want to use counter someplace else? Maybe you want to use it to make an API call or something. Then it becomes really, really restricting. To this kind of model becomes really, really very, very restrictive. But thankfully with React state, with React hooks rather, there's a clean abstraction on state that makes this so easy. Excuse me. Let's see a typical example with a new counter. So let's call it, let's use a functional component for this. Let's call it second counter, counter2, basically. And what it does is to use a React hook. We're going to copy this since the logic stays the same. I'm going to copy this, for example. Basically, React hook has a hook called use state. We're going to see that in a bit. All right. Since we have this as count, and basically use state, react.use state. Use state is a React hook that helps to cleanly abstract a React state, and it takes an initial value, which is 0 in our case for the counter or the count state, and then we can set count here basically. And so we have count, and then we can set count here just